Welcome to the Living in Biological Harmony podcast, where we explore the deeper meaning behind symptoms, relationships, emotions, and healing through Germanic healing knowledge, energy, and natural living for women and their families. This is a space to replace fear with truth, calm, and a more biologically aligned life. Welcome, and thank you for listening. Before I begin, please note that this is not medical advice or a protocol. My name is Jeanene, and this is my personal story, seen through the lens of Germanic Healing Knowledge, or GHK, and how biological conflicts and patterns has completely changed the way I relate to my body, my children, and my life. My hope is that as you listen, you begin to recognize some of your own patterns too. Not to blame yourself, but to understand your biology with more kindness. It has been a long healing journey, studying health and healing for almost 25 years now. And when I look back, I can see that my biology was always telling me something, even when I had no understanding of it. As a child, I struggled with constipation and was later labeled with IBS, Crohn's, celiac. Today, through Germanic healing knowledge, I understand that as my intestines were trying to work through something I could not digest in my life, it was not only about food, it was also about situations and emotions I could not process, literally, like my dad's drinking habits, or my parents fighting, or disputes with friends. I had many cavities and later in life osteoporosis in my jaw bones, and eventually the removal of all my molars, with bone grafting and later implants. That is what GHK would call a bite conflict, or self-devaluation of the bone. I wanted to bite back, to oppose, to resist, but I could not. That unexpressed bite landed in my teeth and jaw, and even in my nail biting, as a bite constellation. At the same time, I suffered from panic attacks, often triggered at school when I forgot my words during a speech, or that I was supposed to give and the class laughed at me, and also in the car when my father drove recklessly because of alcohol. I felt trapped. I was in fear. I was powerless, unable to change the situation. As I got older, the symptoms would come and go, and there were times when I had severe chronic fatigue and could barely get out of bed. My bones and joints ached, especially my shoulders, my feet, and my back. At different times, this was labeled as Lyme's, Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue, and mono. I had many ticks on my body growing up in Africa. It felt like an endless list. From a GHK perspective, most of this was self-devaluation, often mixed with other conflicts. Times when I felt I was not doing enough, not strong enough, not coping, not smart enough, not holding it all together. It makes perfect sense to me now that these symptoms came and went, because the conflicts came and went. And when I look back, I can see exactly what was happening in my life each time my body and bones felt so weak. I also had memory loss that terrified me. I would lose words, forget what I was doing, misplace things and not find them for weeks. My skin was dry, my hair was thinning. All of these are signs of separation conflicts, the biology of being torn away from someone dear to us, or from a place that held us, like moving homes or countries. I had also lived through several big moves and losses, and so it fits perfectly. And a separation conflict can also be experienced as wanting to be separated from someone, something, or someplace. Even wearing tight, uncomfortable clothes each day can relate to symptoms like a rash once you remove the discomfort and the conflict resolves. On top of that, I experienced several cluster migraines. I now understand that healing happens not only in the tissue, but also in the corresponding brain relay. All healing takes place in a fluid environment. When healing is active, there is edema in the brain, fluid pressing on those cells. That pressure is what we feel as headaches and migraines. And so, once again, there is nothing wrong. Your body is not attacking you. It is not a mistake. It is a meaningful part of a very, very important repair process. At one point, it felt like a diagnosis layered on top of diagnosis. The IBS, the Crohn's, the celiac, the fatigue, the migraines, the hormonal issues, jaw problems, anxiety, bipolar. I was constantly searching for the reason behind my symptoms. From the outside, I was doing everything right. We lived on organic farms, in fresh air. We grew our own food. We lived in the nature. I tried every diet, every detox, every protocol. I did enemas for 4 to 5 years. I did GAPS, clean eating, sugar-free, gluten-free, you name it. For more than 20 years, I was convinced the answer was out there in the next program. It was during my naturopathy training with energetic wellness, and then later through my GHK studies, that something more honest came into focus. I realized I had been living in fear, living in hypervigilance. My nervous system was constantly scanning for danger, toxins, EMFs, mold, food ingredients. This was the soundtrack in my mind, especially when we were away from the farm, visiting friends, traveling, at parties, or in the cities. I was afraid of anything that might make me sick or harm my children. On the outside, it looked like being careful. On the inside, it was constant background stress. I was always conflict active. I always had cold feet and cold hands. And then I came to another painful realization. 2 of my best teachers, women who seemed to know everything about health and lifestyle, ended up dying of cancer. And that shook me deeply. I knew there had to be something more to this than just food, supplements, clean living, and doing everything right. And this is where Dr. Hammer's work comes in and the 5 biological laws, which we will discuss in more detail in another episode. The clearest example of this in my own life was my reaction to EMFs. Over time, I became extremely electrosensitive. And when I came close to a tower, a modem, or even a cell phone, I would feel it. My words would disappear. My mind would go blank. It was frightening because it felt like my brain was shutting off in real time. When I began learning Germanic Healing Knowledge, I did what we often do in this work. I went back to the timeline. I asked myself, when did this actually start? What was happening right before this became such a big thing? And I remembered very clearly. I watched an EMF summit where the speakers were saying that EMFs could cause memory loss, dementia, and Alzheimer's in the future. That moment really shocked me. It caught me completely off guard. I took it in as truth, and from that day, I thought about it constantly. From morning to night, I replayed the words in my mind again and again. From that point on, I began scanning for danger, just like they had told me to do. I blamed everything on EMFs. If I was tired, foggy, or forgetful, it must be the tower. And if my children were restless, it must be the Wi-Fi. In my mind, the world suddenly became full of invisible threats. Through GHK, I learned something that was both simple and profound. It is not only the substances that trigger symptoms. It is the shock and the way we perceive something in that moment. A sudden fear, a sentence that lands like a punch, can activate a very specific brain relay. In the case of separation conflicts, the affected relay is connected to the skin, but it is also tied to memory and word recall. That was exactly what I was experiencing. And when I would see the phone, I would suddenly lose my words. It was not brain problems or brain damage. It was not radiation frying my mind. It was my biology responding to something I had labeled as invasive and dangerous. On a very basic level, I wanted distance. I wanted away from it. My brain was helping me disconnect from the fear. The more I feared it, the more paranoid I became, the more hypervigilant I became, the stronger the reaction. It was a loop. Fear, symptom, more fear, stronger symptom. When I truly understood in my body that the trigger was the shock and my perception of EMFs, not the phone or the tower itself, something shifted. I began consciously reframing it. Each time I saw a phone, I reminded myself gently, this is not harming me right now. My brain is safe. My nervous system is safe. I stopped repeating the summit story in my mind and I started speaking to myself instead. I was no longer fighting radiation. I was calming my own biology. Little by little, as the fear dropped, the reaction slowed down. The dizziness eased, the word loss stopped, the hypervigilance relaxed. The symptoms stopped running the show because the underlying fear had finally been seen and soothed. I finally found a way to downgrade this. I still believe it is wise to create a harmonious home. We choose wired connections where it is practical, as well as biogeometry applications. I still choose quality organic foods over processed ones whenever possible, because it just makes sense to choose what comes from nature. But the energy behind it is different now. I no longer live in paranoia. I'm not making choices from panic. I am making them from partnership with my body. The biggest lesson for me was this. Even if you live on a farm, grow your own food, filter your water, and remove every external stressor, if fear is still running underneath, the body will continue to respond as if you are under attack. The environment can be perfect, but if the perception is, I am not safe, biology will follow that perception. Not only that, if we are afraid and in conflict active mode, the body is using up more sugar and more nutrients to fight off the danger, and so it's very difficult to heal. That realization was a turning point. The EMF story is just one clear example, but the same principle applies to everything, to food, to chemicals, to toxins, to diagnoses. The moment that reality shocks us, the story we attach to it, that is what the nervous system responds to. Now, instead of asking what is out there that is hurting me, I ask, where did this fear start? What did I hear or experience that made my biology say I am not safe? And then, what do I need right now to feel safe, held, and grounded in the moment? And this is also why I'm so passionate about our work with anxiety and paranoia. Because once you understand that your reactions are tracks of old fear and not proof that you're broken, you can begin to step out of the loop. My body has been my most loyal storyteller. Constipation, IBS, Crohn's, celiac, panic in the car, bone pain, fatigue, hair loss, migraines, electrosensitivity. None of it was a mistake. It was my biology trying to protect me, adapt for me, and buy me time while I lived in a state of constant alarm. So through GHK, I finally learned how to listen to that story differently. I learned that healing does not begin when the world becomes safe. It begins when we do. When we trust the intelligence of life again, we lessen the fear and the body can stop reacting and start resting. That is what living in biological harmony means to me now. Not a life without conflict, but a life where I understand my conflicts, where I can see the patterns, and where I keep choosing trust over fear again and again, one nervous system breath at a time. If this perspective speaks to you and you'd like to go deeper, you can explore my courses at biologicalharmony.com, where I teach how to understand symptoms through the lens of Germanic Healing Knowledge and how to begin to see the body with more trust, awareness, and peace.